Greetings. We begin asking, why will Christ's return be a huge surprise to all nations? The quick answer is, most people will not be watching world events and comparing them with God events. Jesus said this in Luke 21:35. He said, "For it will come as a snare." Look up the Greek there. It means sudden or unexpected. It will come as a snare on all those who dwell on the face of the whole earth. This is the coming of Jesus Christ he's talking about. Jesus warns true believers to be ready for the coming God events. We need to study our scriptures. We need to know how God has mapped out just a few of the major events. Luke 21:36. "Watch," says Jesus, "therefore, and pray always that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things which will come to pass." What's he talking about? He's talking about the whole tribulation period. He said, "Watch and pray always that you might be accounted worthy to escape the tribulation." By watching and praying every day, servants of Christ will be seeing world events and Bible prophecies appearing together. Jesus provides an escape plan for vigilant believers. Matthew 24:15. "Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place," and then he says in parenthesis, "whoever reads, let him understand." Do the study. Check out Daniel. Find out what it means. And verse 16, "Then, when this abomination of desolation stands in the holy place, then," verse 16, "let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." Now, many do not understand this phrase, abomination of desolation. They don't really have to, right? We've done tapes on it. You can find the tapes on what it really means. But you don't have to understand what it means. But the event occurs on the same day as the daily sacrifices are turned off. Now, we don't have daily sacrifices in Jerusalem at the holy place yet, but we will have. They have prepared everything. They are waiting for permission from the Israeli government to begin morning and evening sacrifices like it talked about with Moses back in the Exodus and back in the early days of the nation of Israel, way, way, way back when they began with 12 tribes. Daniel 11:31, "They shall defile the sanctuary or the holy place, then they shall take away," you look up the Hebrew there, it means turn off. They will take away the daily sacrifices, right? They haven't started, and they will start, and they will start, and they will continue for a time, and then on the day that they are taken away or turned off, then they will place there the abomination of desolation. So you have a holy place identified by the morning and evening sacrifices, which haven't started yet, which will start soon in the future, right? And when they're proceeding, that will be the holy place, and that will be where the daily sacrifices are. And on a certain day, the abomination of desolation will be put there in place of the morning and evening sacrifices, which will be turned off. Jesus tells believers this moment is their last chance to flee before the devastating war against the people of Jerusalem. In Mark 13:14, "So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the place where it ought not, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." Verse 15, "Let him who is on the housetop not go into the house, nor enter to take anything out of his house." This shows you how dramatic, how important it is to leave as soon as you hear the word. Now, we've got cell phones. You can hear it on cell phones. You can hear it on radios. You can hear it on TV. Your neighbor could call you and tell you. People in Jerusalem, people in Israel will know on the day that the morning and evening sacrifices, which are a really big thing in Israel, will be stopped and replaced by the abomination of desolation, and people will know. And Jesus says, here's what you do. Here's your response. Your response is, don't go down into your house. What's your first reaction going to want to be? Go get some camping gear out of your house. Get some food out of your house. Get some extra clothes out of your house. No, says Jesus, Do not go down into your house, do not enter, and do not take anything out of your house. Next verse, verse 16, Mark 13:16. Let him who is out in the field not go back and get his clothes. When you're working in the field, you take your outer garments off and you hang them on a fence post. He says, if you've got to flee to the mountains that way and the fence post is that way with your clothes, do not go get them. And the logical thing is, I gotta get my clothes. It's going to be cold in the mountains. I need my clothes. Jesus says, don't do it. Now, this is a parachute moment. What do I mean by parachute moment? In World War II, the warplanes, the people on warplanes, all had parachutes. And they were trained in how to use a parachute. And they were trained in what circumstances in the plane you would need to open the hatch, open the door, and jump out of the plane and pull the cord on your parachute and float down, hopefully, to safety and not die in the flaming, exploding, burning, crashing hulk of the plane that is going down, and that's why you jump out of the plane. They're trained in how to use the parachute, they're trained in when to exit the plane, and they're trained in what to expect after they leave the plane. The plane goes off that way, they float down this way, and they are trained in parachute techniques. Jesus wants his faithful trained in what to expect before and during the tribulation. So in Luke 21, we see more of this. It says, verse 21 of Luke 21, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Next verse, 22, for these are the days of vengeance for Jerusalem, for Israel. Verse 23, there will be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. God is angry. The world is angry at Israel. And Israel has more enemies than you can shake a stick at. Verse 24, and they will fall by the edge of the sword, the people in and around Jerusalem. Another verse says, when you see armies camped around Jerusalem, flee to the mountains. So you tie that verse with these verses here. They will fall by the edge of the sword. Okay? Old-timey language for die in battle. That's what that means. And some of them will be led away captive into all nations. And that's happened before, right? They go into prison camps. And Jerusalem will be, during this war and at the end of this war, Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles, by non-Jewish people, until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled, which is 3.5 years. If you look up in Revelation 11:2, talks about 3.5 years for the trampling of Jerusalem underfoot. Those who hear Jesus and trust in his words do as he says. They pay attention to what he says and they do what he says, and they can be hidden away from the calamities of the tribulation period. We read earlier that they can escape all these things. In verse 36, watch, be watching carefully, pay attention, study the scriptures, study the events in the news. Pray always be praying day after day, be praying for more insight, more understanding, more comprehension, that you may be accounted. If you're doing these things, you can be accounted worthy to escape all these things that have come to pass. Now, the people in Israel, the people in Jerusalem who are paying close attention to these words from Jesus, they're paying close attention to world events, they are going to put two and two together. They're going to see the sacrifices turned off as the last chance day. Right? We read where he said, don't go into your house. This is no longer time to get packed to go to the mountain. Don't even go get your cloak hanging on the fence post. This is panic time. This is, you heard what happened. The sacrifices are turned off and replaced by something. Okay, all you need to know is the sacrifices have been stopped. Once you know they have been stopped, this is the day, this is the hour, this is panic time to get up, to quietly leave the city. You don't have to run screaming out the front gate of the city. You just need to quietly leave and head towards the mountains, because that's where you're going to live, in order to not be killed in battle, in order to not go into prison camps, but to be safe and escape all these things by living in the mountain. This parachute moment means, teaches that we need to be trained in what events to expect to be coming along and coming in the world newspapers, hardly any TV, cell phone, newspapers are not all that big anymore. Events to expect and how to respond to these events. The unspoken logic that goes along with these verses we've studied, that says flee to the mountains, the unspoken logic is when the morning and evening sacrifices actually begin. They're ready to begin. They don't have permission to begin. When they do begin, logic says that you should pack up, you should get your camping equipment. See, he says, don't go down into your house on the panic day. That's your last chance day. But as soon as the morning and evening sacrifices begin, logic says, round up the kids, the wife, pack some food, get the camping gear, get the tent, get the sleeping bags, get whatever you need to go live in the mountains. And, 2 or 3 days after the sacrifices have begun, or 2 or 3 weeks, you don't know, right? You don't know exactly when they're going to be stopped. So when they start, this is a good time not to panic, not to wait for panic day, but to begin making your journey up into the mountains and stay there, because Jesus said, these are the days of vengeance. People are going to die in battle. People are going to be taken away into prison camps. So servants of Christ should be looking for 3 major events to occur before panic day occurs. Event number 1 is a mighty military force captures Egypt. Now, right today, that sounds crazy. Nobody is planning to capture Egypt, except maybe ISIS. ISIS would love to capture Egypt, but no one else in the world, maybe Russia or China, would like. No, they're not really trying to capture Egypt, and Egypt is an ally of the United States. And so, event number 1 in the progress towards panic day is a mighty military force captures Egypt and captures many nations around Jerusalem while protecting Jerusalem from its enemies. You have to read the verse slowly. This is Daniel 11:41. He, meaning the mighty military power, shall enter the glorious land. The glorious land is God's people's land. It's Israel. It's Jerusalem. He shall enter the glorious land, same breath, and at the same time he's entering the glorious land, many other countries shall be overthrown. It doesn't say he overthrows the glorious land. He enters the glorious land, which would be being attacked, because that's what's happened so many times before, and that's what many are threatening to do, to drive Israel into the sea. And many countries shall be overthrown, verse 42. And he shall stretch out his hand against the countries, remember, back one verse, the many countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. So Egypt gets captured. That's the major event to be watching for. It's not immediately on the horizon, but in the next 6 months, in the next year, in the next 18 months, it could easily come to be that Egypt gets captured. And then you better start strapping on your parachute. You better mentally prepare for event number 2. Then comes event number 2, a massive war pictured by trumpet number 4. If you've read in Revelation the 7 trumpets, read trumpet number 4 and then compare it to Daniel 11:44. That's even a memorable thing, right? So trumpet number 4, and this massive war destroys 2 other mighty military forces. So you have 3 mighty military forces. One has just captured most of the nations in the Middle East. Then he attacks the other 2 mighty military forces and defeats them and destroys them. Daniel 11:44. But news from the east and from the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go out. You have to read scripture slowly and in your mind do the processing, do the calculating, do the meditating. And he shall go out with great fury. This is blitzkrieg style. To, and then you have to go really slowly on these words, to destroy and annihilate many. Which many? Those to the north and those to the east of where he is in and around Jerusalem and Israel. verse 45. So he survives this destroy and annihilate many, verse 45, and he shall plant the tents of his palace or his headquarters, right, where the center of his activity is, between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. He sets up headquarters over there near Jerusalem, between the seas, the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea. Yet, and this is a shocker, yet he shall come to his end, and no one will help him. So he's done unbelievable, incredible events in the Middle East, which the average person not following Bible events and God's events, they're just going to say, oh, well, I thought we might have World War III, and wow, look at that, we did have World War III. And oh, wow, all things continue as beginning and giving in marriage and stuff. Jesus said, things will continue. World War II, things continued. People got married in World War II. People got married after World War II. They just took it in stride. But this is events number 1 and events number 2, and then comes event number 3. And event number 3 is what we just read, that incredible conqueror, mighty military power, world leader person comes to his end. And then event number 3 is he is replaced as world leader by the beast power king mentioned in the book of Revelation. Over in Revelation, he's given the title by God, the beast, the beast, the beast, the beast. The beast does this, the beast does that. The beast makes war with the Lamb. That's Jesus Christ of Nazareth, who's coming back on a white horse. He makes war. The two of them make war. Guess who wins? Jesus wins. All right, Daniel 11:21. And in his place, this is the event number 3 we're looking for, in his place will arise a vile person to become world leader. And the world will be much smaller then, right? We've destroyed some mighty military power and territory. So the world will be smaller, right? And Europe will still be there, and Israel will still be there, because Jesus comes back to Jerusalem, which is not covered in nuclear winter. So it's still there. It's trampled underfoot by the Gentiles for 3.5 years. So Europe and Israel and the Mediterranean areas are still there and still habitable, right? So he comes in peaceably and he seizes the kingdom by intrigue. This is the third of the 3-king sequence, and 10 verses after this verse, the same king stops the daily sacrifices. And that's where we started. That's where we came in, because when those daily sacrifices are stopped, it's panic day. It's time to jump out of the plan. It's time to move quickly to the mountains without going into your house to pack anything, without getting your cloak off the fence post. Daniel 11:31, just 10 verses later. And forces shall be mustered by him and shall take away the daily sacrifice. They will stop the daily sacrifice and place there the abomination of desolation. So even if you don't understand the abomination of desolation, once the morning and evening sacrifices, which will be started in the future, on the day they are stopped in the holy place in Jerusalem, they will be replaced by this thing called the abomination of desolation. The important thing is that the morning and evening sacrifices will be stopped, and that signals panic day, get out of town if you haven't already gone. Jesus wants us to be mentally prepared to act when these events unfold. All the nations will not be expecting these God events to occur, and so will be totally surprised when, after 3.5 years of tribulation, Jesus appears in the sky, coming down on a white